All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Own Your Life podcast. I am Mike,
I'm Coach Jonathan.
and today we're going to talk kind of maybe a part two or a piggyback off of a recent episode, episode 15, if you haven't seen it yet, where we talked about, hey, I just started CrossFit today or this week. Like, what are expectations and timeline, and what should I focus on first? Well, today we want to talk about maybe a part two. We talked about nailing a couple different things in that episode. The first one is like just show up. We want to be the type of person that works out 4 times a week, build the consistency in the workout plan, actually get the benefit of the working out because I'm doing it. Then we talked about sleep, protein, and then hydration. So I've nailed these. Let's say I've been doing CrossFit for 6 months or maybe a year, maybe even 3 years. But like, let's say I've been doing this for a while. I've nailed those, and now I want to get even better. Not just long-term health, but maybe we're starting even to push into competitor CrossFit, or I'm just trying to get better at my pull-ups, or I want to get a muscle up. What's the next step after I'm no longer what we would consider maybe a beginner in CrossFit? How do I work my way up the ranks of maybe into intermediate or advanced, the way we categorize stuff at the gym on the whiteboard? How do I make the jump after I finish beginner? How do I get from to intermediate? And really, how do I get intermediate to advanced? What does that jump look like?
Yeah, so this is great because I think, when people start doing CrossFit, and then the cool thing about CrossFit is like you can see progression, right? So you're like, hey, I want to be able to do that movement or get better at that thing. And then we do that. And then the question always is like, well, how can I get better at that faster? Or like, how can I progress more? So I think it's a very valid question. The main thing about anything when we start talking about this is like sustainability. Okay. So if you're like, hey, I want to get more, awesome. Number one, you got to be able to recover from it. So just very simply, the baselines of sleep, nutrition, hydration, like that's going to be, am I recovering from it? Because if you're not recovering from it, you're not able to actually progress past it. So whenever you're doing something and you're, training your body and you want the adaptation, meaning like you're training today and you're creating stress so that you can adapt and handle more stress, whether that's the looking of, I can lift more, I can go longer or go faster. Like if you want to do that, you have to recover from the stress. So sleep, nutrition, hydration, we said, hey, we're doing those things. Okay, cool. So then the next thing is, can your body handle it from a range of motion perspective? So it's like, hey, do you have the mobility to do the thing? Or like, are you doing it with poor technique, or are things pushing you into the range of motion that you don't own? So like, for example, like if you don't have proper shoulder range of motion and getting a bar directly overhead is a problem. In order to get that bar over your midfoot, you have to like arch your back. Or when you're on a pull-up bar, if you're kipping, you run out of that range of motion. It's a lot of force on the shoulder. So it's like if you were to improve that range of motion, 2 things would happen. Number one, you'd be in a more safe position when you're putting a bar overhead, but you would also have better movement quality, both from the being able to press directly overhead, it's just more efficient, and also like being able to do the kip swing. Go the other way, if you don't have the range of motion and you're pushing hard into it, like you have a higher likelihood of injury, which is the fastest way to lose your gains, because then you can't train. You can train around it. Yes, that is a thing. But if we can avoid it and we can literally see, the cool thing about CrossFit is like the movements, you can actually see if you have the range of motion or not. Like you can actually use the movement as a diagnostic, and you're like, okay, yeah, we're missing something there. So like, instead of doing more workouts, you would actually be better spent spending more time doing a little bit of extra bit of mobility work, going to see Dr. Ryan, going to do something where like you're like, hey, I'm actually restoring and improving that range of motion. So like that'd be the first 2 things I would say, because again, you got to be able to recover, and you also don't want to go backwards. Okay, so I mean, is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. When we wear the 1% Better bracelet, and this is maybe not directly on topic, but one of when somebody comes to my class for the first time, and all of our coaches do this, but just my exact line that I say to people when they come to their first class, we talk about the 1% Better. I remind them they have their bracelet. I remind them it's up on the wall, and I say, even the smallest step forward is better than any steps back, is the concept of 1% better for me. And I would rather take 1 inch in length steps forward for the next 365 days, then take any step backward, because I'm always moving forward. I'm always progressing. I mean, it's just fun to progress. Like psychologically, that's cool, but also the beat down. And again, if you rip your hands doing a whole bunch of pull-ups, I mean, yeah, I guess you can just tough it out and suck it up, but like you really limit your ability to use your hands for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 days, maybe even week or 2 or 3, depending on how severe it was. So if you take a step backwards, you just undid all those inches that you gained. So the injury thing is completely under talked about. And so if somebody's trying to do more workouts or all this, or trying to go harder and heavier, and they feel like oh yeah, I remember which one this movement is, and let me try to PR by 10 pounds. Doing it safely is completely underrated, I think.
Yeah.
Of getting high quality reps at 1 more pound than last time, rather than trying to eke out a rep at 10 more pounds than last time with a risk of injury.
Yeah. That's the number one way to like delete success in your fitness is to get injured, because you can't do the things that have the best impact, So like, and I actually categorize a hand rip as an injury because it limits how you can train. So if you rip your hands and then we have something next time to train and it's a movement you want to get better at, but your hand is your limiter, you missed out on that input. So you're better off having gone a little less and not ripped the previous. So you got the compound of the second session. Like that is very underrated. It's very underrated, like what those consistent inputs can do. So, but let's say, okay, so you're doing well with the nutrition, you're recovering really well, you've got the range of motion. Okay. So the first thing is, and really the context of this are people who like, they're enthusiasts about this, or they want to get into like local competitions or like do the CrossFit Open and then go to quarterfinals. Cause like now the cool part I love it. The cool part about the Open is like now the top 10% get to go to quarterfinals, and then the top ranking people based on the area that they're in go on to semifinals, which is a very small percentage of that 10%. So what's cool about it gives the Open, it gives us something who are in that realm to shoot for, because it's like it's doable. Like Mike and I, like him more so than me, but like, we've looked at each year of the Open, and if we worked on a few weaknesses, like we could probably push into that. And we've had some people at our gym. So it's like a cool goal, right? It's fun that CrossFit has given us that. So this context, most of these people are probably like, hey, I'm a fitness enthusiast. I love this. I want to progress. Or like, hey, I do want to like, do local competitions and like perform better. And I want to do the Open and perform well and make that quarterfinal level. So here's the deal. When you look at those two things, they're a little bit different. I'm going to speak specifically to the Open quarterfinal local competitions. A local competition, you're going to need to be able to do a couple things in one day. With quarterfinals, to get to quarterfinals, you got to do well in the Open. Open is 1 workout per week. So if you want to do well in the Open, class is the best place to replicate that. So like, because the Open workouts are like 8 to 15 minutes. They're common CrossFit workouts. And they're comprised of the things that, especially at our gym, we do on a regular basis. So like, number one, don't get injured so you can always work on those movements for the next year. Okay. So like, don't rip your hands, don't do something to your shoulder, like get the range of motion, be able to recover. So, but then the next piece is like, you want to train the way you want to perform. So like in the gym, when you have a day of a workout, you do not want to sandbag it, because that's not what you want to do during the Open. During the Open, you would want to give your best effort first shot. And then if you really wanted to redo it, you would know how to build on top of your best effort. You don't want to sandbag it, then try to figure out how to do it after that. So in class, like you don't want to approach the workout in a hesitant way. You want to be like, okay, I'm going to kind of go for this, right? Because you're going to learn more about yourself by trying to increase the intensity a little bit. And as long as, again, like you have the range of motion and you can control the movements and you're not doing any like, like gross faults or whatever, like let's go for it, because that's the way you want to do the Open to get to quarterfinals. So that would be what I would say in class. And the way you could do that is, say you have a workout and like you see some of the prescribed weights or whatever, and you're like, okay, cool, those are great. But like we're doing like the bike or the row, like row or bike at a more aggressive pace that you're not sure if you can do every round. Like move faster between movements, like jog your transitions, like start to increase the intensity of that session, because again, it's that one effort, right? So the better your body gets at putting in a large amount of intensity and then recovering till the next day, that replicates the open. That's how the open works. Now, local competitions, most around here that we know of for most people in the, intermediate advanced in our gym, like most of the divisions are pretty well categorized and you'll know what you can do based on the standards they set forth. But for those, like, movement efficiency is king. If you're going to do multiple movements in a day and you're going to be a little bit fatigued, if you can't move well, everything is harder for you. Plus, you're going to be doing multiple events in the day. So it's still the same exact principle. So, like, increasing the intensity of your training in the gym is the number one place to go. Once you have the mobility, once you can recover. That's where I would start.
Okay, so yes, like you said, so number one, be able to recover for what I'm doing now. Mm-hmm. Number two, make sure technique is dialed in, range of motion, mobility, that category, so that I can handle my current loading. It's part of recovery, actually, in a way, but also doing it well is more efficient, and so I become better over time just naturally. And then the next, talking about like working out like you would compete, right? Like making sure we're hitting workouts in class at the same intensity in which we want to compete often. Maybe it doesn't have to be literally every day, but often, most of the time.
Yeah.
Type of thing. Obviously, if you need a cool down day or a rest day, you need to go 80% today. That's cool. But
be smart.
Most of the time.
You know what? Let's say, that's important. So it's like you don't do this every day. What I'm saying, like you do it, and then the next day, if you need to decrease intensity, you work on skill. So you focus on really moving well, really nailing positions, really making sure that you're moving the highest quality movement you can, and then just decrease the intensity. So, but again, you're marrying the two. You're not just leaderboarding every day. So like, and when I say that, like we use SugarWOD, there's other apps that gyms use or whatever, but like you're not trying to win the workout today. You're trying to train the stimulus that's going to move your fitness forward. So I'll give you, this is the best example for me. Every time we bike and row, those machines just tend to, like, their higher power output. I'm not an extreme strength athlete. So like on those days, like especially in workouts that are like a certain amount of rounds, a fixed amount of rounds, like rounds for time, I challenge myself to increase my output on those machines, even if it makes the other parts of the workout a little more challenging, because I'd rather adapt to the machines than get faster at doing burpee box jump overs. Burpee box jump over is not a movement I'm too worried about. I'm pretty efficient at it. I can do it pretty much at any heart rate level, but I will sacrifice my total time for the training adaptation of the bike or the rower. And that's what's going to move my fitness forward. So that's based on what my current fitness is, and that's what's going to move me forward. So like, you don't care about the leaderboard, you care about the actual fitness adaptation that you want so that you can perform better. And then that goes both ways. So like someone who's a strength-based athlete, like, yeah, still do the heavier loads, but like on the body weight movements, challenge yourself to something a little more aggressive, or running, because normally strength athletes in the machines, you can handle it, but like running, things start to go down. So maybe go shorter distances, faster cadence. Like there's just different things you can do, but like that's the number one place to gain. Now, and so once you do that, and I think the next thing we're going to talk about is like if you were to train twice a day. So, okay, let's say you're doing this one session that's very intense, right? Like you're really like pushing for it. What that means is you're using your energy production at its highest level in this session. So if you're going to do a second session, that needs to be lower intensity, and it needs to be very focused on both recovery and efficiency. And I said deficiency, not efficiency. So like it needs to be set up in a way that you can recover for the next day. So it doesn't need to be super intense. Like people like to talk a lot about zone 2 cardio. The idea of zone 2 cardio, whether it's zone 1 or 2, it's just from 60 to 80%. Zone 2 is from 70 to 80% of your heart rate, your max heart rate, if you want the technical range. But the idea is that will utilize your aerobic system, but normally it's slow enough that like your power output is not creating like any more like physical stress, large amounts of physical stress to your musculature and joints. So like it's not going to create anything else that you have to like to extremely recover from. So it can help you recover. But so something that is slow enough where like you're moving, blood is moving, lymph, or like the byproduct of inflammation, like lymph is moving out and you're getting fresh blood in. But then also like that's where you do the slower focused practice of skill work, or like whether it's like bodybuilding or rehab or corrective exercise to improve the other stuff. That's what you would do in a second session. Because again, you gotta be able to come back next day with intensity, because we watch it all the time. Like, that's the thing we see in the open. If you want to make it the semifinals, that's a different thing, right? Most people we're talking to in this, or that's not their actual goal. It can be, but even if that's your goal, but you haven't yet made it to quarters, what we're talking about now is what will get you to quarters. Once you do that and we see we have that baseline, then we can talk about what we would do next. But if you're going to do a second session, it needs to help you recover, and then it needs to address whatever you're deficient in. So take a movement that positions or coordination are very challenging for you, whether that's an Olympic lift or in a gymnastics movement. Break it down and do the skill work that makes you better at it at light loads. True story. When Brittany first moved down here, I was like, I want to get better at my snatch. She said, okay. So I would squat a little, but I would do technique work at like 40 to 50% of my 1 rep max twice a week. And that was it. I think one time a week I did a thing like a snatch balance plus overhead squat that I would build up to a little bit heavier, but it was literally 1-1. It was not like a bunch of reps. The whole thing was skill driven. And like I even told her, I was like, Brittany, when am I going to snatch? She's like, you will. First time I snatched from the blocks, I snatched 5 pounds more than my previous snatch PR. And I had not snatched other than like a 75-pound snatch in a workout. That's because that session was all about skill. It was slow. Well, I mean, it's fast when you're doing the snatch part, but the weights were so light, I could think about every single detail and I could focus on actually getting better at the movement. That's what you want to do on the second session if you're going to do something. Now, for some people, that is going to be building muscle mass. So bodybuilding works for that. But, your mobility work, getting into better positions, like that's what you would want to use. And so if you marry those two, like you'll progress very quickly compared to what you're currently doing. Because if you just try to do more intensity, most people, the intensity drops off. And you can't harness that unless you're training it. So like you choose one session for intensity, then you choose the other session for recovery and efficiency.
Okay, so let's get specific. Let's get some examples. You mentioned the snatch skill work and then getting better the ultimate goal was getting stronger in the snatch for that example. But let's say I'm trying to get either my first bar muscle up or multiple or pull-ups, or let's pick something gymnastics just as an example, as another category. How would I train getting better at pull-ups and muscle-ups in a way that I can still follow the rules of my second session is meant to be, it's about my deficiency. That's what we're working on. But I can still recover from it so I can hit tomorrow's sessions well. Like, are there numbers to do or not do? Are there numbers of sets or times? Or how do I know if I'm doing enough, but also not too much? How do I pick the sweet spot?
Yes. So great question.
It depends.
Yeah, it does depend. Now, there's some frameworks we can talk about. So number one thing is like, could you, what you're doing, it always needs to be enough to challenge your current skill. So like it has to be enough to like challenge where you're currently at in the skill, but it can't be so much that you can't wake up tomorrow and do it again. So like if you're doing a skill session and you do it and you're doing it at 5 p.m. at night, if you couldn't wake up at 5 a.m. and do the exact same thing with the exact same focus, it's probably too much, okay? Because like most people, if you did Murph one night and you woke up the next day and try to do Murph again, it'd be a little too much, right? I know that's extreme, but that's the way to think about skill work. It's supposed to be easy to recover from. Doesn't mean that while you're doing it, it's easy. And that's going to be different for each person. It just means that it's slow enough, low amounts enough where you can like really dial in how you move. Okay. So like, let's say you want to get better at pull-ups. Let's be very specific. Let's say you want to get better at chest to bar pull-ups. Okay. Number one, the question is, where are you at in the skill? Okay. So let's say like you're trying to do chest bar pull-ups and like your kip is great for 2, but then after 3, 4, 5, it goes away. Okay. So meaning like you start to lose coordination, you hit the bar in different spots and you just lose the rhythm of the kip. So a skill session, what the goal of the skill session, right, is to get better at the skill. So, man, shout out to Drew Crandall and Misfit Athletics, because this is something I've learned and it's helped me a lot. So what you want to do is you want to start with what you know you can do with good skill. Okay, so like a chest to bar pull up. So first off, you would want to warm your shoulders up. So a little bit of mobility work, like some lat pull downs, some face pulls, some strict pull ups, some kip swings, like the basic things that get you doing the thing. Then you take the movement and then you take what you know you can do and you start with that. So like if you know you can always do 2 reps, you just start practicing 2 reps. Okay. So kip, pull, hit your chest, drop off the bar. Okay. And then focusing on just getting into a rhythm. Okay. Do that 3-4 sets. Then try to add the third. Okay. And if you add the third, awesome. Rest until you know you can do another set of 3. And then rest till you know you can do another set of 3. And so the goal would be just to add one more. Like Mike mentioned, the inch forward rather than a big step back. Like the goal is just to increase the skill. So like get smoother at it, get the kip, and then do it. And here's the key. You only want to do enough that you know you get practice, but you know is not a problem in your training. If you've been doing this long enough, the people that we're talking about, you'll know some of this stuff. So like if you know when you do a workout with 50 chest to bar pull-ups that your arms are pretty sore for the next 2 days, you don't want to go over like 25 or 30 total reps because that's your threshold. Like if you do too many to where it affects your training the next day, then it can be problematic. So you just drop that number down. But again, skill is about neurological change and repetition. So if you do 25 reps and you can recover from it, you can do that again tomorrow. Like you can do that multiple days. And so now your frequency can go up. So that's how you do it is where are you at in the skill? What can you consistently always do? And then you're just trying to add a tiny bit to that. So like for the snatch, if you're trying to get better at the bar staying close to you, then you can do snatch high pulls, muscle snatch, and then you can do hip snatch or tall snatch. All of those require you to keep the bar closed because you don't, like if it goes away from you, it's hard to execute those lifts. So you just do those, do them at like 40 to 50% of your 1 rep max. You can do, honestly, as many reps of that as you want. Most of the time, you're going to be okay, but you never do so many that it has a conditioning effect. And most people, that's going to stop you at like 5, 6, 7 reps. So again, it's not going into the realm of conditioning. It's staying in skill work. And those guidelines, that if as long as you know exactly where you are in the skill and you're just trying to increase a little bit, you'll normally not do too much. This is also the pitfall of just doing another workout. Normally, if you add another workout, you're adding more volume, and that's where most people run the risk of doing too much. Is like, oh, I did the skill work. Now I'm gonna do a workout with chest to bar pull-ups in it after I just practiced my chest to bar pull-ups, and then expect to come back the next day and have some high level of intensity. Like that just doesn't usually happen. Now, if you don't work, you're a full-time athlete. You have 6 to 8 hours a day to optimize sleep and recovery, and you can sleep 10 hours. Probably can handle that. But most people aren't doing that. And again, what's the first thing is, can you recover from it? And is it safe for you to do? So that's what I would do.
Okay. So that's a skill-based movement. So we talked about pull-ups or muscle-ups or chest to bar. I might even put snatch in the skill-based realm, at least the way that we've been referencing it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say, Coach, I'm just a little guy and I want more muscle mass because it's going to support everything else I do. Am I going to be able to put on muscle mass without being, quote, sore or recovering? Or like, what would maybe my weakness is I'm trying to, I mean, I need to hit the big 3, like squat, bench, and deadlift. Like, what would maybe some accessory work or extra things to do for that? What would that look like for an athlete trying to specifically build size, strength, muscle, maybe power, throw it in that category too?
Yeah, that's great. All right, so this is what I would do. Whenever like we program at the gym, the idea is we try to prevent massive amounts of redundancy, meaning like day to day, like Monday to Tuesday to Wednesday, there's enough difference where you could easily come every day, right? So like we try to avoid doing the exact same every day. So knowing that, so say you go to class and like the workout has a bunch of air squats in it as part of a conditioning tool. That's your day to like do some like moderate to heavy back squats because you already did squatting. You're probably not going to do it the next day or two. You've already, and so you can maximize it knowing that. So like for that, what I really like is I like just building to like moderate heavy type of stuff for most people. And so if I were trying to get stronger, and which I'm always trying to get stronger. So like for me on that day, so say you did a bunch of air squats and stuff as part of the conditioning workout earlier, and you have a chance to go back squat, I would build up to, I would do like 3 sets of 5 at like a moderate to moderate heavy. And what that would mean is like at a weight where it feels challenging to do 5, but you could probably do 2 or 3 more reps if you felt like it, and you do it with good technique. Because here's the thing about strength development. There's 2 parts. There's organic, so like the actual musculature, joints, bones, the actual structures of your body. You're going to get that from multiple fronts. So you get that from doing high rep air squats. You get that from doing heavy back squats, from, thrusters, like all those things. But the other part is neurological. So like your brain becoming more efficient, knowing what muscles to fire when. So like whenever you're squatting, the key is actually just getting under loads that are heavy relative to you, like your current fitness level, and then your brain learning how to move those loads. So like as long as you you do 3 sets of 5, you do 5 reps, and like you're like, I could do 2 or 3. Cool. Just do that again and just focus on squatting really well, because you're getting under a heavier load. It's putting a physical demand on you, but your brain is like, how do I do this with this heavier load? And your brain's learning how to control where your knees are, the balance in your feet, the position of your torso, the tension in your upper body. So you're learning those things by doing those. So I would maximize it by like, if you did it in class, that's probably the thing to work on later that day. So like if you did like, heavy snatches that day, like go back and work with the empty bar on your snatch later. You just practice the snatch, like go practice it some more. Like you probably learned something earlier in the day. Go practice it more, because you're less likely to do that movement the next day. And honestly, like for the most part, except for a couple days in a month, the volume we do in class is not so much that you couldn't do a little more of it later, especially if it's like, ideally, I need to say this. I'm talking like if you worked out in the morning and you came back in the evening, like you had time to recover and stuff like that. As long as you're doing that, like you'll probably be cool with any of that. So like for that, same thing for deadlift, same thing for bench press. And the reason I say moderate heavy is the injury prevention thing. You don't need to max out your lifts. Like you only need to max out your lift when it's a test for performance. Like as long as you're like progressively being under heavier loads, you will get stronger. And again, like the goal of CrossFit is you're getting better at a broad amount of things. If you just back squat once a week, and then say you bench press once a week, and you just build to moderate heavy 3x5, and the next week you go by feel, and like say the next week, like, I don't know, you had some stressful event over the weekend and it just felt heavier than last week, that's okay. Just go a little lighter. It's the state of being under heavy things that makes you strong, not necessarily that you hit certain percentages, in the context of what we would call concurrent training, which is like we're training multiple aspects. We're training gymnastic skills, cardiorespiratory endurance, stamina, and strength. So that's how I would approach that. Do it on the same day that you already know you did, because we probably won't be doing it the next day, and just hang out at moderate heavy. Don't worry about going super heavy.
Yeah, awesome. That's a good one. A couple other examples that come to mind is like push-ups is a pushing movement, or maybe a better way to say this is I was talking to somebody the other day. They were asking, they're a pilot, and so naturally they're traveling and they get, they have access to gyms and memberships and stuff, and they were asking about in this category of like, hey, I'm trying to put on strength and size, et cetera. And I gave them a similar answer, and I was trying to give them more options. And so like push-ups turns into either bench press or maybe an overhead press, squatting, heavier squatting, or just weighted squatting. Any pull off the floor can be deadlifting, any upper body pull. So even the back to the chest bar example, maybe the area that you're missing in the chest bar isn't the skill. Maybe it's the strength of the pull or the range of motion to get the extra couple inches to your chest. You can work on this pulling strength. So weighted ring rows or tempo ring row. I don't know. But you can start working on tempo pulling, bent over rows. And then another thing I mentioned to him was traditionally, as a blanket statement, we tend to use the barbell a lot, or two-handed things, or two-footed things. So even when I'm doing air squats, it's 2 feet. And I told him, one of the things I told him, I said, hey, and if you get a chance, just divide yourself in half. Try a double dumbbell press rather than a barbell press, just to kind of build some of the extras, or the lunge instead of the squat. If you want the quote like accessory after you maybe went for the 3x5.
Yeah.
How's it going? Okay, so that was strength, and then the last category I wanted to circle was what about stamina? Maybe this is because I'm on the outside looking in on this one, but like I say stamina, cardiovascular endurance, specifically, let's say running, biking, rowing, like maybe being able to do burpees and stuff like that. Or you mentioned burpee box jumps. You feel like you can do it pretty much any heart rate within reason, and you can still perform. A lot of people don't feel that way. So somebody working on that side of the spectrum, the cardiovascular stuff, how do you get better at that? Or how do you work on that specifically? You know, numbers, reps, times, distances. How do I do that outside of class or maybe inside of class? But like how do I get better at that category?
Yeah. So the reality of all those movements that he just listed is you have to be able to sustain your output. Okay. So like when you run, every step is a rep. Okay. Every RPM on a bike is 2 reps because 1 RPM is 2 presses of the pedal, like 1, 2, and then the pull and push of the handle. So like you're managing reps and the power your body can put out. So if you want to get better at it, what you want to do is identify, you know, like what's pretty common, and then, you know, you would want to increase that output, but manage your recovery from it. So here's a great example. So like say you run 400s and you run consistently 2 minutes, but you want to get better at running 150s. So one option is in a workout that has 400s in it, you could lower the loads or the other things so that you can increase the speed of your run and make that the non-negotiable of the training session of like, hey, I'm going to run these things at 150, and I realize it may compromise what happens when I get back for the dumbbell snatches and pull-ups or whatever. That'd be great. That's like the workout they just did at the games, bar muscle-ups and dumbbell snatch. But like you challenge yourself to that output, but then you make it a little easier when you get in the gym so that you can recover from it. I mean, if you wanted to do repeats, you can. That's the principle behind repeats is like, say you run a 400 and 145 and you rest 1 to 1. And then you run until you can't run it in under 150. Because once you start to decrease your speed, you've lost like the benefit of training at that speed. So you don't need to do any more. So like if it's 4 of them, you run 145, 145, 147, 149. Then the last one you run 152, you're off, right? Then the next time you could do that exact structure again, and maybe you get to the 6th one, right? And like, but you have to be able to recover from it. So because you're training the output. So whether it's a bike, like a 20-calorie bike, if you know, I can rocket the bike at 65 RPMs for 20 and be okay, but 70 is a little iffy. Is you could just do that would I probably do like 1 to 2 work rests. So like you do the 20 calorie bike, 70 RPMs. That's under a minute probably, or right at. Yeah, probably under a minute. And then rest 2 minutes, and then do that until you creep up to like over a minute. And you use that because your goal is to train the output. It's not just to do more of the thing. So and then the longer the duration, then that's where it gets a little bit more, you have to be a little more accurate. So like if you want to get better at running 800s, and you want to run at a 150, 400 pace, that's a 3 minute and 40 second 800. You can give yourself a little more buffer, like 10 seconds or so. So like you can run anywhere from 330 to 350, but you're trying to average that speed. And then you can do 1-to-1 work rest, or you could just do that in the workout and say, hey, I'm going to try to run these in 340 or less, and then lower what you're doing inside the workout. So if you have the time to do it, you can do the work rest stuff. And I always recommend doing something to recover a little bit while you're doing it. And that can just be like slowly walking around, not just laying on the floor, because you're going to start doing more movement. So you use that active moment to recover. You don't have to stay on the bike and pedal or stay on the rower and row, but just get up, move around a little bit so your body can recover from the effort you just did. So that if you have the time to do repeats, that's how you do it. You just pick a target time. Most often 1-to-1 work rest works well. And then try to hit those times. And then when you start creeping up out of like the range you're shooting for, then just stop. And it's okay if you only get 3 or 4 of those the first time, because you're just exposing yourself to it more frequently. If you're doing it in class, like you're like, hey, I don't have time to work out extra, that's where you say, okay, I'm going to do these outputs, but I'm going to adjust the workout accordingly so that the other things are easier and I can still hit the stimulus. So like say it's like a 20-minute AMRAP and it's a 400-meter run plus like 2 or 3 things, and the design is for it to take like 4 minutes a round. That means you would get about 5 rounds. So you want to be able to go on 5 runs. So what you do is you say, okay, I'm going to run 145, and I'm going to adjust the dumbbell weight and the movement inside. I may even rest a little bit more in between doing those 2 movements so that I can recover and then attack the run. So you treat it more like the structure of the run than you do trying to score your highest AMRAP score. That's how you, James Hobart calls this targeting a workout, is you choose that target. So that's how you would do the cardiorespiratory stuff. 1-to-1 work rest, pick a target speed, repeat it, or do that in the workout and just make sure you adjust the rest of the workout so you can hit the actual intended stimulus of the day.
And that might work for probably all the categories. Just pick with it, target your workout.
Yep.
You know, so if you're working on getting stronger, again, assuming technique, assuming you can recover and all that, maybe a 5-pound heavier dumbbell, but, you know, less of something else, or less like effort into the pull-up portion. Maybe we go pull-ups instead of chest to bar that day because you're trying to get stronger at the dumbbell. You could probably apply that to a bunch of ones.
Yeah. Again, it's about recoverability. You do enough of those, you'll be good over time. So, well, someone's calling.
That's all good. Well, hey, I was going to wrap it up there anyways. So quick recap. I'm a CrossFitter. I've been doing this for a while. I'm not considered a beginner anymore. And I'm trying to figure out how I can increase myself into intermediate and into the advanced side of things. Things I want to consider. Number one, I have to be able to recover from either what I'm doing or what I'm going to be adding. So recovery is key. If I can't recover from it, none of this stuff matters anyways. The next one, similar category, but mobility technique. I've got to do the movement well, and I've got to be able to own the ranges of motion to do those things, because injury is a step backwards, and that just undid my last day, week, maybe even months worth of progress, depending on what happened. And then after that, that's when it starts to split depending on the person. And so the thing I wrote down that you said was working on your weakness and not leaderboarding. So I'm not concerned about the highest score that day. I'm concerned about working on my personal weakness. And then we broke down, if you were to do a second session, again, you have to be able to recover, follow that rule, but you got to work on your weakness. That's awesome. Sweet. So that's the one. Hope you guys have an awesome one. Hope you enjoyed this one. If you liked it, send it to somebody, like and subscribe, and we will see you guys next time.
See ya.